两个字音在一起 alright? Some letters are okay, like L is not so hard to say with other sounds. But for a lot of them, we have a very easy pattern. Like, even here. This is from German. In German, we pronounce the K. But in German, we can pronounce all kinds of sounds at the beginning. German also has PF at the beginning of a word, which is really hard to say, actually. So English is easier because we cancel these sounds, but there's a pattern. M and N are hard to say together. Mnemonic. So what we do, we don't say this one. If it's at the end of the word, condemn, it's also hard to say. So we don't say this sound. But if it's in the middle of a word, and we can have a vowel for each of them, then we can say them both. Amnesia. Amnesia. Okay. Now these words I use because they have M and N together. And it's an easy pattern to find. The words are hard, but these are common words in English. Common enough. Alright? But this pattern holds in other places too. Like with the K and N. We can put them together. If we talk about, in high school, some people have problems with their skin. Alright? Acne. It's easy to say because there's two vowels, so we can separate them. Alright? But if we try to put it at the beginning or at the end, it's actually pretty hard. So this pattern holds for everything. So there are a lot of ways where the English words from different languages, they each have their own patterns. But for a lot of things, all of English still has the same basic sounds. So there's a lot of things that can work together. Okay? Now, when we look at other parts of these languages, there's another aspect to learning words. So I still want to talk with you a little bit about how you can learn the words then. Because this is fun, but if you can't use it, then it's just fun. It's not really helpful, okay? But you can use it. You need to ask the right questions. To start with, how about, you said you had a couple questions.
Yeah.
So let's go with that first. 如果你们有问题是比较好的, right? So.
Okay, the first question is, can we say that English is a young and mixed language?
Yeah, it's fairly young and it is mixed, yeah.
Oh, okay. Pretty young, right? Because
yeah, 1,000 years, a bit more, yeah. If we look at the oldest English as part of English, then we have maybe 1,500 years. If we look only at modern English, then it's more like 500 or 600 years. So it's not very old.
Okay. My second question is, I heard a saying, you just mentioned that the people, English people and the French people, they hate each other, right?
Yeah.
I heard a saying that French people think or thought that French language is the most language in the world. So they still think that French should be the international language using in the world today. So they hate English, they do not want to learn English. Have you heard that kind of saying
A
or
lot of
statement?
them do learn English because it's money,
Uh-huh.
you know? If you have the language, you can get more money. But the thing is, France is one of the very few countries in the world that still has laws protecting its language. The French government controls the French language. They have a branch of the government that only looks at the language. And they decide if we get to use certain new words. They decide if any English words can come into French. They actually control the use of French in France. And that's getting to be a big problem for some people because England is not, it's not a big happy country, right? We have the United Kingdom, which is England and Scotland and Wales.
Right.
And then we have, I always forget it. The United Kingdom is those three, and then Great Britain is all of it together. But the Irish don't want to be part of it. Scotland wants to separate. Wales wants to do its own thing. They want their own languages back, right? This is true in every country in Europe. If you look at Germany, there are parts in Germany, the North and the South don't always get along. People in the South, they make fun of the North because the North is where you have a very strong military tradition. Wherever it's colder, people tend to be more militaristic. They like to follow rules more carefully. So people in the South say that the Northerners are not friendly. And people in the North say that people in the South are lazy and they're, there's always this kind of a problem. In Italy is 20 small countries that have all been forced together. The Italian that people speak about is the language from this little area here. And the rest of Italy does not speak the same language. They actually don't like the North and the South. They don't usually get along. The islands want to be separate. Spain is all about separation. I don't know if you heard this in the news, but in Spain there was actually a conflict between the army and the police because the army supported one system, the police support the other system. So you can read about it online. So France, same thing. In France, we have different language groups based on who the people were. And the people in the south in France have a language background that the government in Paris does not recognize. The people on the west coast have another language system that they don't recognize. So, for a long time, France has been one country and they've had one language. But they have one language because the government kills everybody who tries to change it. They don't kill them anymore, but,
Before.
there is a very strong system in France for protecting their language because of their national pride and their pride in their language. But the problem is, it's these people. It's not everybody else. So,
Cool.
yeah, actually, because of that attitude, when the French came to North America, Canada still has English and French, right?
Right.
So, in Quebec, this is the French part of Canada here.
Right. They speak French.
They speak French. They have police who control the language.
Oh.
It's really funny. In every part of the world, stop signs say stop. All right? Now, I think this has changed some in Quebec because the government isn't quite as strong as it used to be. But it used to be every other place in the world where you see a stop sign, it says stop. Even in France, it says stop. But in Quebec, it says arrête, the French.
Oh.
They had a law, they had people go to jail for breaking this law, where your sign for your store has to have more French than English. The French letters on the signs have to be this much bigger than the English words.
Oh.
They actually have rules for that, and police to make sure that people follow the rules.
Wow.
So,
Wow.
in a lot of ways, French causes problems for itself because it makes other people hate the language.
That is language control. That is truly language control.
Yep.
Unbelievable.
Well, people do things like that.
Oh.
I mean, look at the government in the mainland and what they did with the Chinese language,
Uh-huh.
right? So, it's not just French, but yeah, there aren't a lot of countries who try to do that. So, this is true. French has had a lot of problems like that. As a result, though, their language is very consistent in a lot of ways. In many forms, the French has not changed in a long time. So, if you go to Canada, though, the French people speak here is different from the French in France.
Oh.
Because the French people who came to Canada, they went there 300 years ago.
Uh-huh. So they developed their own culture.
They stopped developing,
Oh,
actually.
stop. Okay, okay.
The French we use in Canada is actually 300 years old.
Oh.
The French in France has changed in time,
Oh.
and the government has guided those changes, but the French in France is modern French.
Changed.
The French in Canada is 300 years old, and it hasn't changed.
Uh-huh. So can they communicate?
Not very well.
Really?
When my relatives go to France
Uh-huh.
for holidays,
Uh-huh.
they speak in English.
Uh-huh.
My French relatives from Canada, from the French, when they go to Canada, go to France, they have to use English.
Oh.
Yeah.
So do you have a French background?
Mhm.
Oh.
Well, I had to learn French because Canada is bilingual, and everybody, well, you see, this is very close to the French part. So my father is from this area, his parents were from the French part. I grew up right over here.
Uh-huh.
So our part of Canada was very, very mixed, half French, half English. And that's part of why I try to understand how languages work, though. And I shouldn't say this on camera, but it's probably one of the things that makes Canadian English teachers better than the American English teachers. Because we have the extra language background. The problem with only having one language is that you never have to go through learning a second language. It makes it very hard to understand the problems that your students have. So, it's not that there are no good American teachers, but anybody from a language background with only one language has a harder time to understand what it's like to learn another language. So,
I have another question. After you have learned the origin of languages, do you still believe that human beings are created by God?
oh yeah, absolutely.
Really?
Mm-hmm. It's a matter of science versus faith. Because, okay, this has little to do with language, but if you think about it, the idea that you have a God who lives forever, He created something. Okay, you have to believe, but I can accept that. The idea that there's nothing, there's absolutely nothing, and suddenly, everything exists. That's magic.